So let's take a look how things stand after turn 9 now. So we're going to be heading into turn 10, January 1941. So again, mostly the pace slows down a little bit after that turn 7 and the frenzied activity throughout the globe. So the Germans did a couple of things on this turn. They went into Romania, so they aligned Romania. And not only did they gain all those forces there, all the Romanian forces, but Romania is worth $3, and also Germany gets a $3 bonus for being in possession of Romania. So it's kind of like double dipping. So that was worth $6. So that was a big boost. They also came in and took Yugoslavia out. So that was another $3 for Germany. Besides that, really just kind of maneuvering things around for purchases. They bought 5 more medium armor. And they continue to move stuff around. So just outside of West Poland, they've got a stack of about 10 medium armor, 5 self-propelled artillery, 5 regular artillery. They got 4 more medium armor in Berlin. So Germany definitely building up a bunch of ground forces. They haven't bought a naval unit in a while. They kind of gave up on after turn 7, and they lost their entire navy, including all their U-boats. They kind of gave up on putting anything in the water for a while. Wanted to concentrate more on ground units and fortifying Europe, as well as gearing up for a potential clash with the Soviet Union. One thing that I had forgotten to do for Germany was, since the nationalist forces won the Spanish Civil War, the side Germany was backing, they are entitled to 1 free infantry per turn that's placed in Berlin. So I went back retro and put the stack of German infantry down there, because that would have been 6 turns since the Spanish Civil War concluded in Germany's favor. So I put those 6 infantry down in Berlin. It didn't really affect anything either way. The infantry would have just been piling up 1 per turn anyway, so didn't really affect the game, but I didn't want to cheat Germany out of the spoils of Franco's victory in Spain. So I put those guys down there. That was about it for Germany, so they're up to $51 right now, so looking pretty good. As far as the Russians, they finished off the Baltic states. They took Lithuania. They already had Estonia and Latvia. And they continue to maneuver stuff around. So the Russians are actually building up a pretty sizable force over here in Kursk. They, on this last turn, the July 40 turn, they now had access to medium armor. So they put down 5 T-34 tanks. So in Kursk, they've got a couple light tanks, 5 medium tanks, 5 self-propelled artillery, and 5 motorized infantry. So kind of hanging back from the border. They don't want to suffer from the initial German assault if it comes. So, and they're basically out of reach of the German Air Force as well. So if the Germans do go into Russia, that Russian force should be safe from the initial German attack and then available to launch a counterattack, depending on what direction the greatest threat is coming from Germany. Russia is up to $41 after their D12 roll as well. As far as the British go, they bought 3 fighters and 2 destroyers. They bought 2 destroyers, a tactical bomber, and a medium armor. And just like with Russia, they had access to medium armor starting this turn. So they dropped the 2 destroyers down outside of London. They kept the 3 fighters they had bought the turn before in London. And they started moving some units down here, trying to make their way to the Med. So you've got 2 destroyers, 2 transports, a light cruiser, and then 4 infantry loaded up on those transports. So the British need to get them into the Mediterranean and start taking back some of the territories they lost in Africa. This British fleet stayed where it was. Didn't want to pull it out entirely. Thought about bringing it back and combining it with this fleet that's making its way down from London, but then that would have given the Italians the bonus by pulling out the ships. And then if I pulled out most of them except for like one, just to keep deny the Italians the bonus, that would have been easy pickings for the Italian Air Force. So just kept that whole fleet right there, kind of guarding that portion of the Mediterranean. And then the planes that were down in Gibraltar flew down here into West Africa. So that's 2 fighters, a strategic bomber and a medium bomber. Again, didn't want to leave them in Gibraltar because they were within range of the Italian Air Force. So didn't want the Italians to pick them off. Also didn't want to send them anywhere here in North Africa. I mean, like Tunisia, they could have landed there. That's a free French territory. Or they could have landed on Malta, but again, they would have been in range of the Italian Air Force. So brought them down here so the Italians couldn't hit them. And now they'll make their way around, maybe coming up from South Africa into Central and Northern Africa. And then for 2 of the British units they purchased, the medium armor and the tactical they placed down in South African Union. So starting to try to get some kind of offensive punch going to start making their way back up and hopefully reclaiming some of these territories from the Italians. As far as the United States, they continue to build up forces here on the East Coast in anticipation of getting into the conflict down the road. So they purchased 2 more transports, a couple of medium armor, and 2 infantry. So the Americans altogether have 6 transports here available to take 6 infantry, 4 artillery, and 2 medium armor, possibly to Africa or Europe, depending when the U.S. does get into the conflict. This fleet down here, I had thought maybe it could move into the Pacific. It can't. Someone who had commented earlier, comment from earlier, that it takes the U.S. being at 63 IPP, their wartime income, to actually move between the Atlantic and the Pacific with ships. So this fleet is still outside of Panama, just waiting for the opportunity to head over to the Pacific. And the Italians, they came over and took Transjordan. So that was another buck away from Britain. And then they were able to align Iraq because they are in possession of a territory adjacent to Iraq. So that was up another $2, and they gained the infantry for that as well. As far as purchases, the Italians went ahead and purchased another tactical bomber and then 2 minor factories. So they pulled their entire Air Force back to northern Italy, and that's where the new tactical bomber went down. So the Italians now have 4 fighters and 4 tactical bombers in northern Italy. And with the airfield there, they gain the extra movement. So they can move 5 spaces. So they're in a perfect position to maybe attack the British fleet, depending on if they leave it vulnerable enough, or they can come back here to North Africa and assist with the defense of those territories. And then the 2 minor factories, they placed them in each of these 2 territories here, Cyrenaica and Tripolitania. That's the maximum they can place is minor factories. So they need to start getting some units down into North Africa for defensive purposes, with the British coming, probably making their way over to the shores of Africa in the next turn or 2. Obviously, the only other way to get units over here, well, they can do air transport, but they don't currently have any paratroopers, but would be for naval transport. But obviously, with Britain in control of the Mediterranean, no sense buying transports that'll get killed right away. So they had to go ahead and put these couple of minor complexes down. So each of those territories will produce 1 unit per turn. So not too bad. The British only have minor complexes on the continent of Africa as well. So it'll kind of be a race between the 2 of them who can build up units the fastest. I have a feeling Italy probably will come out ahead, even though England has the greater income. Again, that Italian Air Force is going to help out a lot with that. So that was it for Europe. In the Pacific, Japan has continued to make a little bit of a comeback here. They took a couple more of the money islands down here in the South Pacific, so only Java is left in Allied possession. So that was good. And they also combined a couple of small fleets together off of the waters of a couple of the money islands. They also went into Burma. There was a single Far East Command infantry there. So they took him out. They also pulled back from central China. So they're kind of a little bit of retreat mode. On the communist Chinese turn, they had taken a couple of vacant territories, and Japan really didn't have enough to challenge either the communist or the national Chinese down here in southern China. So they have enough on their plate, so they just kind of pulled back, took an empty territory back away from the communist Chinese, and are just going to kind of make their way back to Rihe, I think. Just for now, let the communists and the nationals battle it out and leave China to its fate. The Japanese also put down, they completed 2 battleships, a fleet carrier, and then also purchased 2 destroyers. So they're building up the remnants there of, or the beginnings of a third fleet. They definitely are concerned with what the U.S. is going to be able to bring to the table in terms of naval forces. That was about it for the Japanese. The Far East Command, again, couldn't do a whole heck of a lot. Siam was still defended by a militia and 3 fighters, so these 4 infantry down here in British Malaya weren't going to get the job done. They did also have a fighter and a tactical they could bring, but they didn't want to weaken the defenses of Calcutta that much. The Japanese do have a couple of transports floating around down here in the South Pacific and some decent air power. So the Far East Command kind of just sat where they were. They did pull this militia off Ceylon into southern India, and then they bought a fighter and 2 medium armor this last turn. So Calcutta's getting some decent defense going. They got 4 infantry, 2 medium armor, 2 fighters, and a tactical. So it could be enough to hold off the the Japanese. Don't expect the Japanese attack for a little while anyways. As far as Anzac goes, just save their money. They're only at $6 a turn, so not a whole heck of a lot they can do. And they're denied their bonus because the Japanese have warships within 2 sea zones of Australia. So Anzac's really kind of hamstrung. The U.S., they can now start moving ships in the Pacific, just not between the Pacific and the Atlantic. So they brought some ships down from Sea Zone 29, combined them off of San Francisco here in Sea Zone 64. And that was about it for the U.S. In China itself, besides the Japanese action, both the communist and the national Chinese kind of just dancing around each other without engaging in combat. Both sides building up forces. You can see down here, each side has 1 stack of pretty much equal infantry. So which side's going to blink first? The problem is, obviously infantry only normally attacks at a 2 to begin with, and both of these territories are mountainous. So if one of them goes into the other territory, it's about even in terms of the number of units. But their opponent's going to have 4 for defense, and they're going to be at 1 because of the mountains. So they might just kind of continue to sit and stare at each other for a while. As far as the economics go and the tech, the Axis actually got some really good news there. So as far as the tech goes, Japan hit on, I think, 3 of their 4, including war economy and heavy battleships. So they completed both of those. And the Italians also completed wartime economy. So the only 3 techs that have been completed by either or any of the 3 sides all belong to the Axis, 2 for Japan and 1 for Italy. And that's especially important, the wartime economy, for the Italians, because their income isn't that high to begin with, just $16. So they need all the extra money they can get. And even Japan has only got moderate income at 31. So that was a really important tech for both of those countries, and they both had good rolls. Japan rolled two D6s. They rolled a total of 11, and Italy rolled a total of 9. So that was a big boost in money for both of those countries. Germany's just at the doorstep to several techs. They're at stage 3 for improved construction, improved factories, wartime economy, and advanced artillery. So maybe a breakthrough here on turn 10 for Germany. And then as far as the Allies and the Comintern go, they actually had some bad rolls. I think the U.S. was 0 for 4, Britain was like 1 for 4, and Russia was like 1 for 4 with their tech rolls this turn. So none of those countries have completed any tech right now. The closest we're at is Britain at stage 2 with improved factories and improved construction. The U.S. at stage 3 for jet fighters, and the Russians at stage 3 for heavy armor. So we'll see if any of those countries can break through and complete some tech here on turn 10.